Yes. Go ahead, Christophe.
Thank you, Mathieu. So good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to introduce this series of workshops. So we'll have two workshops today. The first one is on the governance and organizational aspect of the market coupling process. And this afternoon, we will have a second workshop on the capacity calculation and the bidding zone review. Maybe just to start with a bit of a reminder of where we stand in this process. Maybe we could go to the next slide. So where are we in the in this process? After an initial scoping phase toward the end of last year, as you know, we received a request from the European Commission to issue a recommendation on the amendment of the CACM guidelines. So we spent the first part of this year in the drafting phase to discuss with NRS, but also with stakeholders, these possible amendments to the CACM guideline. And we started a public consultation. So we are in the middle of this public consultation, and these two workshops should help us to get an insight of your forthcoming contribution to this public consultation. In terms of next steps after this public consultation phase, we will finalize together with NRAs the amendment to these guidelines, and we will send our recommendation to the European Commission, and then toward the end of the year, and then the comitology process should start. Maybe we could move to the next step. So regarding the agenda of the first workshop, so we will have three short presentation. The first one will be an introductory session from Mathieu Franzen, who is leading this CACM guideline process on behalf of the agency. And then we will have a colleague from ARERA, Salvatore Lanza, who will present the organizational aspect or proposal for the organizational and task of the market coupling process. Then we'll have a joint presentation from Pavel Svoboda and Julio Quintela from Acer and Julio Quintela Casal from CRE about the market coupling development and the operation. And then, so it will last approximately 1 hour, these three presentations, and then we will have a Q&A session. Can we move to the next slide? Yes, some important housekeeping rules. So I would like to invite you to keep your micro muted and your camera off throughout the workshop. You will have the possibility during the workshop to pose your question via the chat box function. All the attendees will view all the questions and if possible, the replies given in the chat. If you need, if we need further clarification regarding a question, you will be invited to open your mic and to clarify your question. But again, it's important to remember to mute your mic again once this clarification has been provided. As I say, we will have after these three short presentations, we'll have a Q&A session, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, and we'll go through all the questions received during the webinar. So we invite you to provide your question for the Q&A in the chat during the presentation. As you know, the slide pack will be shared with you after the end of the workshop, and I would like to inform you that this webinar will be recorded and will also be available on our website. So now I will hand it over to Mathieu to introduce the CACM amendment and the public consultation. So Mathieu.
Thank you, Christophe, and thank you all, and welcome to this workshop indeed again. So for me to briefly introduce the background to the CACM amendment process and also this consultation. So a brief background on the legal framework. So as highlighted by Christophe, this process is part of a request from the Commission to provide amendments, which is indeed in the electricity regulation that the Commission is empowered to amend network codes, and indeed that ACER may propose amendments to those network codes in accordance with paragraphs 2 and 3 of Article 60. We can make those recent proposals, and when doing those amendments and doing those proposals, we should explain how they contribute to market integration, non-discrimination, effective competition, and efficient functioning of the market. This Article 63 also states that we need to consult stakeholders in accordance with Article 14, and Article 14 clearly refers to these amendment processes that we need to extensively consult at an early stage market participants, and indeed all the parties belonging in that group of interested parties. So this public consultation is really performed with the objective of providing input to the recommendation on these recent amendments on the CACM regulation in accordance with Article 63 of the electricity regulation and Article 2C of the ACER regulation, because it was indeed a request for a recommendation by the European Commission. The public consultation approach we've taken here was indeed to really work on, as Christophe explained, we worked on drafting amendments in the first quarter of the year, making it very concrete where we think CACM regulation should go. And we really invite stakeholders to look into this and provide their input to it. This is going in two levels, really looking at the proposals and giving your opinion, whether you agree or disagree, feedback on the reasoning, but also an optionality where indeed your own inputs can be provided. So you can provide your own amendments and indeed also your own reasoning. These two levels, it indeed allows stakeholders to generally respond to it, but also to be very specific in their requests on specific articles. So we hope we allow this approach to really get detailed feedback from you, but at the same time also lower the entry barrier to participate, because it is easier to respond without having to write a huge amount of text. So for today, and looking at the new structure of the CACM regulation we propose, we've introduced a number of new titles, really setting out the process of the CACM regulation, from literally from beginning to end, the general provisions, organization, question calculation, market coupling, bidding zone review, and then the reporting and transitional provisions, and a separate part on the system operation guideline proposals. For today, for this workshop, we focus on Title 2, on the organization of market coupling, and on development and operation of market coupling, Title 4. So Title 2 and Title 4 are what we discuss in this workshop. That was it for me, and I will now pass the floor to Salvatore Lonza from AGEA.
Thank you very much, Mathieu. So for your introduction, my task for today is showing the proposal on market coupling organization and tasks. As Mathieu already introduced the subject, Title 2 is made of 3 chapters. The first one is MC organization, the second one is related to tasks and responsibility, and the third one is related to cost. So my presentation is meant to give you an insight on these 3 subjects. Next slide, please. So we start with some rationale, and of course the question is why change the organization? I would like to briefly recall you that this process started in 2018 within a structure created by the European Commission, the so-called subgroup on governance, made of the European Commission, ACER, NRAs, TSOs, and NEMOs. And at that time, all parties started discussing the current governance foreseen by CACM, and they identified several flaws. I tried to summarize some of them in this slide, and I will show you also. I will explain you why these are have been identified as flaws of the current design. So first of all, we realized that the MCO, the so-called market coupling operator tasks, are not clearly identified in the CACM, and this is a source of potential confusion. On top of that, some tasks do not seem efficiently assigned to the entities that they are assigned. So a kind of reallocation of tasks seems to be required. If we go into details, we see also that there is no clear separation between a competitive NEMO task and monopolistic NEMO task. So you know that NEMO are vertically integrated entities, and some tasks are competitive or potentially competitive, regardless the fact that the member states choose the competitive or monopolistic regime, while some other tasks are monopolistic in nature. So, and those are the tasks related to the market coupling operator. Another characteristic of the current setup, which is not satisfying, is the fact that TSOs are not sufficiently involved in decision-making process. In particular, the strategic decisions, so the decisions related to the development of the solutions for market coupling. And this problem has been highlighted several times by TSOs themselves. When it comes to the cost part, which is treated in chapter 3 of the new proposal, well, we acknowledge that there are no clear requirements for identifying costs that are eligible for recovery. In particular, the current version of CACM provides three main principles for NRAs to assess cost. We know that costs need to be efficient, reasonable, and proportionate. But apart from these three very high-level principles, there is no clear indication on how eligible costs should be identified, calculated, and so on. And of course, this is also a potential source of confusion and problems. Finally, the cost recovery schemes applied in the different member states may be different according to the decision taken by each local NRA. And this is a source of potential not equal treatment of all parties. So this is the main list in our view of the concerning the flows of the current design. Next slide, please. And based on this analysis of the current flows, we try to identify a possible way forward. And the possible way forward is the definition of a new governance. And this new governance should be based on some high-level principles, but with a clear practical implication. First principle is clarity. We need to identify in a clear way the task and responsibilities in order to avoid ambiguity. Then we need to ensure effective competition, which means that competitive competitive NEMO task need to be separated from MCO, monopolistic task. And the monopolistic task need to be assigned to independent entities in order to avoid any conflict of interest between competitive part and monopolistic part. Third principle is non-discrimination, which in practice implies the involvement of both NEMOs and TSOs in the strategic decisions related to market coupling, and they have to be involved on an equal ground. And what we want to emphasize is that this involvement includes also the submission of proposals for terms and conditions and methodologies. And we will see later on how the aspect related to the submission of TCMs has been changed in the proposal. Final principle is transparency, and this transparency is in particular related to cost. So we think that a pan-European methodology for cost determination, cost sharing, and cost recovery is really needed. So this is one of the major, the main provision included in the new version of CACM. Next slide, thanks. So now we can address all these issues in the practical structure that we are proposing. Chapter 1 is devoted to the MCO organization, and two proposals have been included in this chapter 1. We can identify these two proposals using this distinction as a centralized approach and decentralized approach. So this should give you a rough idea of the philosophy underlying the two proposals. According to the decentralized approach, some tasks are directly managed by an entity created by NEMOs and TSOs that we call Joint Decision Making Body, or GDMB, using the acronym. Which is a sort of committee without legal personality, and other tasks are assigned to other entities by this GDMB. So we can use as a reference model for describing this decentralized approach what is usually called a network-centric organization. In the picture on the screen, you can see that there is a center, the GDMB, the committee, which is the heart of the organization, with a strategic role, and other entities connected to this center as in a network. For instance, we have the fallback operator, which is in charge of performing fallback procedures, the congestion income distributor, the last resort NEMO, and last but not least, the market coupling operator, which is meant to perform operational tasks related to the MCO. And in the prosecution of in the following part of the presentation, we will see into detail how these MCO entities will play. On the other hand, the centralized approach is a bit simpler. The idea is that all tasks are managed by a single entity. This entity is a legal entity, so with the legal personality, owned by NEMOs and TSOs. So the idea is that the entity plays as a one-stop shop and as service providers. We will see later on that NEMOs and TSOs are not only the owners of the entity, but also to some extent the client of this entity, receiving services by the entity and paying for that services. We will introduce the concept of MCO fee charged on NEMOs and TSOs. So next slide, please. Well, the idea now is to compare the two approaches in order to make clear what are the main differences between them. there are also similarities, so not only differences. Let's start with the submission of terms and proposal for terms and conditions and methodologies. So they are joint responsibility from NEMOs and TSOs, and in both under both approaches, NEMOs and TSOs are expected to take decisions based on qualified majority. So the qualified majority in this specific case is based on the so-called Lisbon Treaty rule. The 50% of member states and the 65% of the population are needed in order to reach the majority, and the blocking minority is achieved when 4 member states are against a proposal. So the idea is that the voting powers initially allocated to member states are then transferred to NEMOs and TSOs active in the member states. So in a kind of two-step approach, one voting power is split in 2 equal parts, one for the NEMO community and the other for the TSO community. If there are only one NEMO and then only one TSO, of course, this half vote will be given to the NEMO and the half vote to the TSO. If the community is larger in the member states, for example, the NEMO community is larger than one NEMO, then this half vote will be allocated to all NEMOs active in the member states, using the traded volume as a basis for the as a sharing key for this voting right, and similarly will apply to TSOs with different parameters. When it comes to other decisions, and in particular to strategic decisions, there is a difference between the decentralized approach and the centralized approach, in the sense that it is already established in the proposal, so in the new regulation, that the joint decision-making body will take decisions based on qualified majority, the same decision rule that applies for TCMs. While for the centralized approach, the voting rule will be defined in the statute and the rule of procedures. So it is not yet completely defined how this qualified majority is characterized in the setting of the legal single entity. Third feature or parameter that we have to consider when comparing decentralized and centralized approach is the unbundling regime. Under decentralized approach, there are 2 different kind of unbundling. One applied to the GDMB, the joint decision-making body, so the committee composed by all NEMOs and all TSOs. And in that case, the unbundling regime is based on accounting unbundling. While the entity or entities performing the operational MCO task are required to be legally unbundled from NEMOs. So this is the different kind of unbundling rule applied in the under the decentralized approach. When it comes to the centralized approach, the legal entity is meant to be independent from the interest of NEMOs and TSOs. So there is a sort of legal shield preventing this entity from giving advantages to specific NEMOs or TSOs. Last parameter to be considered is the assignment of tasks. So while in the centralized approach, all tasks are simply assigned to the legal single entity by the regulation directly, there is a much complex structure for the decentralized approach. As we have seen previously, the strategic decisions are assigned to the GDMB directly by the regulation, but the GDMB is tasked with assigning the additional task to other entities. So the MCO operational tasks are assigned either to several entities based on a rotational mechanism, or assigned to a single entity, but in that case, this entity needs to be selected through a competitive tender. And this will be specified in the MCO plan, as well as the criteria for selecting the fallback operator, the congestion income distributor, and the NEMO of last resort. Next slide, please. In order to be as clear and detailed as possible, the chapter 2 identified the list of tasks characterizing the MCO. So now you can find a unique article listing all the tasks pertaining the MCO process. And the tasks are of course the same for the decentralized and the centralized approach. The difference is the allocation of such tasks under the two approaches. Needless to say, in the centralized approach, all tasks, regardless to their category, are assigned to the single entity. So it's a very straightforward allocation criterion. When it comes to the decentralized approach, maybe it's useful distinguishing between tasks related to the development of the system, tasks related to the operating of the system, and pre and post coupling tasks. So the first block, the task related to the development of the system, and which are, of course, developing of algorithms, systems, and procedures, and assessing the impact of products and functionalities on performance. So all these tasks related to the preparation are assigned to the GDMB, so the joint decision-making body made by NIMOs and TSOs. And there is a clear separation from these tasks and operational tasks. The operational tasks that are listed briefly on the left-hand side of the slide. They are receiving inputs, operating coupling through algorithms, validating and publishing results, and so on, including calculation of scale rate changes and performance of co-optimization and backup procedures. So all these tasks are assigned to the unbundled entities designated by the GDMB. And as I said previously, they may be multiple entities that on a rotational basis perform this activity, or it could be a single MCO selected through a tender. Final block is the post-coupling tasks. So in the post-coupling task, we find the task related to fallback procedures, and there will be a specific entity designated by the GDMB with the goal of performing this fallback procedure, and it will be specified in the MCO plan. And another entity tasked with sharing the congestion income, while the activity of collecting congestion income and performing the cleaning and settlement of contracts between NIMOS trading hubs is left to NIMOS in the decentralized approach. As I said at the beginning, all these tasks are allocated to the single entity in case of centralized approach. Next slide, please. Let's look now at the pre and post coupling tasks that are mainly assigned to individual NIMOs. So under both approaches, pre-coupling tasks are considered as purely individual NIMO tasks. For instance, receiving and anonymizing orders, sending orders to the MCO. So there's no difference between the two approaches. It's clear that they are individual NIMO tasks. There are other post-coupling tasks that are allocated to individual NEMOs under both approaches, and you can see them on the left-hand side of the slide: validating results, accepting and rejecting orders, informing market participants on the results of their orders, and so on, and including clearing and settlement with market participants, which of course is a completely different task with respect to clearing and settlement between NEMO trading apps. And finally, providing commercial schedules to TSOs. With respect to the last resort NEMO task, there is a huge difference between the two approaches, because in case of centralized approach, it will be the single legal entity which will perform the role of last resort NEMO, while in the decentralized approach, this role will be played by an entity designated by the GDMB, and also for this designation process, the MCO plan will be the main document providing all the instructions for performing the designation of the entity. Okay, now we have the last topic, which is related to costs. So chapter 3 of title 2 is related to cost. And also in relation to this subject, we will continue the comparison between the two approaches. When there are, in some cases we have similarities. When it comes to the methodology for eligible cost under both approaches, this methodology is expected to be submitted by all NEMOs and all TSOs to Acer. So I want to take the opportunity for clarifying that all methodologies are direct responsibility of NEMOs and TSOs. So there is no distinction between the two approaches, and even in the case when we have a legal single entity, the responsibility of submitting the proposal is still under the jurisdiction of NEMOs and TSOs. So the legal single entity might be used as a service provider for NEMOs and TSOs. But for drafting, for example, the methodology, but the responsibility is still on NEMOs and TSOs. So this is why there is no distinction between decentralized and centralized approach when we address the submission of methodologies issue. Then we have the annual cost report. As you know, this is also a component of the current version of CACM. So the annual cost report is intended to be submitted by all NEMOs and all TSOs to Acer and NRAs under the decentralized approach. So it will be a direct responsibility of all NEMOs and all TSOs. On the contrary, under centralized approach, it will be the LSE, the entity that will submit the annual cost report to Acer and NRAs. So this is the main difference. And the process put in place for the approval of the annual cost report is the same regardless the two options. So if 2 months expire from the receipt of the report and no NRAs raise any objection, the report is considered approved. Otherwise, there will be an Acer decision changing the report accordingly, according to the objections raised by the NRAs. Also, to be clear on the relationship between the cost report and the methodology. So the methodology is expected to specify in a very detailed manner which costs are eligible and which are not, and how costs should be calculated. So if the annual cost report fully comply with the prescriptions of the methodology, the approval of the cost report should be it should be a sort of automatic process. So there is no discretion from NRAs or ACER in this respect. If the report does not comply with the methodology, in that case, there will be an intervention by ACER, which is supposed to change the report in order to make it compliant with the methodology. When it comes to cost recovery, there is a quite relevant difference between the two approaches. Under the decentralized approach, cost will be recovered through network tariffs, regulated NIMO fees, and other appropriate mechanisms. Maybe a clarification on that point is needed, because it's quite evident that TSOs will recover their costs through network tariffs, while NIMOs you will use regulated fees in case of regulated NIMOs, or other regulated mechanisms in case of commercial NIMOs. What is relevant to clarify is that in both cases, NIMOs will recover their cost, well, the cost related to the MCO activity, through a regulated mechanism. So there is no discrimination between commercial and monopolistic NIMOs in this respect. The distinction is only related to the tool used for recovery, but not in relation to the principle that MCO costs need to be recovered through regulated mechanisms in both cases. So this is for the decentralized approach. For the centralized approach, there is a two-step process. So first step is allowing the legal single entity to recover its cost. And the legal single entity will recover its cost through MCO fees. And those fees will be charged on NIMOs and TSOs. And this is why I initially said that NIMOs and TSOs are both owners of the entity, but also to some extent clients of the entity, because they pay for the service provided by the entity. And the MCO fees are exactly the payment from NIMOs and TSOs to the entity. But of course, NIMOs and TSOs need to be allowed to recover this cost, so the payment that they do towards the entity. And the second step of the recovery is exactly the same as for the decentralized approach. So network tariffs will be used for recovering this cost, as well as regulated NIMO fees, in case mainly for regulated NIMOs, or other appropriate regulated mechanisms for other NIMOs. So in this respect, the two approaches implies the same results, the same consequences for NIMOs and TSOs. Final points, cost sharing. So the same formula that is adopted currently will be adopted also in the future. So you can find the formula in Article 80 of the current CACM version, as adjusted by the guidance provided by NRAs to NIMOs and TSOs. Final topic, incentive schemes. Incentive schemes are expected to apply to both approaches. So there is a quite high level principle introduced in the proposal. The principle says that incentive scheme will be adopted in case of cost recovery. A few words about these incentive schemes. The idea is that the incentive schemes need to push NIMOs and TSOs, or in general the entities performing the MCO tasks, to be as efficient and effective as possible. Efficient means that they have to minimize their cost. So incentive schemes are meant to minimize the cost, but also to be effective. And effective in practice means that they have to deliver on time. So this is one of the main aspects that will be considered for incentive schemes, the on-time delivery of all the obligations stemming from both the regulations and the terms and conditions and methodologies approved. So the idea is that in case the entities are able to deliver on time, they are entitled to recover fully their cost. In case there are delays, incentive scheme may penalize these delays in order to incentivize the respect of the deadline, and incentive scheme may also incentivize the early implementation of projects, providing rewards in case of this early implementation. And this is it from my side. Mathieu, I give the floor to you again.
Okay, thank you, Salvio. Thank you for, well, I think this is a clear presentation. Thank you all for already providing a lot of questions in the chat. We'll get back to that after the next presentation. I now switch to the presentation on market coupling development and operation, and I think it is Julio to start with that.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I will, together with Pavel Svoboda from ASA, present the part of the CACM amendment dedicated to the market coupling development and operation. So it is, let's say, the biggest chunk of the CACM guidelines. So that's why we are presenting this title. So I will firstly focus on the part of the market coupling development, and then Pavel will give more detail on the day-ahead and intraday mechanisms. So maybe we can go to the next slide. So there are three main drivers for the revision of the market coupling part. So the first of them is the improvements that can be considered upon the market coupling. So some of them are very aligned with the improvements that Salvatore has already mentioned on the issues relative to the governance of the MCO, etc. There are also there's also the arrival of the IDAS that wasn't explicitly envisaged in the current version of the CACM. There are also other new ideas that could improve performance of the algorithm or clarify the definition of certain concepts that had been contentious in the past. And a second driver is the willingness to simplify the code as it is. There was a certain level of repetition between the intraday and the day-ahead mechanisms. So that gave, let's say, regulatory complexity, because in the end there were two methodologies instead of only one, which will have been more reasonable. So that there was the intention to, let's say, streamline the processes and let's say consolidate the articles that were reasonably similar, that dealt with the same topics, such as products, maximum prices, scheduling, etc. And a final axis is, of course, the implementation of the clean energy package provisions. So there are some provisions of the regulation 2019/943 on the internal energy market that supersede or that complement the CACM guideline as it is. So we take full note of that, and we in the amendment, a number of adaptations are proposed to take into account the evolutions that took place in the clean energy package. So maybe you can go to the next slide, Mathieu. Okay, thank you. So the colors reflect, as you can see below, the colors represent the three types of improvements that we have classified. You can take a look on the amendment itself, but globally there is a big effort of consolidation on the part of pricing of cross-zonal capacity, firmness of cross-zonal capacity. Also, the algorithm objectives also become a consolidated article. Martin, sorry, Mathieu, I see a rectangle. Okay, thank you. And on the general provision, so that defines the coupling mechanism as such, there is, let's say, the change in philosophy by which the SIDC becomes not only the continuous trading, but the sum of continuous trading and intraday auctions. So now the SIDC mechanism is a composite mechanism, contrary to the SDAC only, which is only the day-ahead auction. So there are a number of adjustments on the algorithm objectives, improvements as we consider them. So there's the definition of scalability and repeatability, which wasn't, let's say, well, there was the mention, but not the strict definition of what it is, and now I've suggested one. The improving the definition of the wealth maximization. Well, it had been an issue on the past, particularly relative to certain well, to certain issues of the algorithm methodology, and there is an opening to the non-uniform pricing approach in order to tackle the performance challenges of the algorithm. We'll have a short word on that just now. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so non-uniform pricing, very briefly explained. The current structure of uniform pricing, so what we have right now, actually, well, the chart is supposed to develop, let's say, the algorithmic process of the algorithm. So in the algorithm, there is a volume determination and consequently a price determination, and then there is a uniformity check. And if that price is not uniform, then there is it comes back to the beginning, and then it tries the different configuration until, if necessary, by using what is called paradoxically rejected blocks, some prices that comply with the uniformity requirement are attained. So what could be a variation is having the algorithmic process, which instead of let's say requesting or imposing that the prices have to be uniform, there are slight variations in the pricing for at the margin of the system that allow for, let's say, financial adjustments. So what is called uplifts, and that in the end, then those uplifts are allowed as a very small distortion of the uniform price itself. The estimation that let's say the estimations that have been done point to the fact of that those uplifts being very small or negligible, but of course more investigation about these functionalities will be in order before doing any transition. So it's mentioned over there, it will be made only after thorough study of the impacts on all stakeholders. The objective will be opening the CACM for that, not doing a direct transition on that direction. So this will relax, well, this could allow for a significant gain in performance, which is in order, which may be reasonable in a situation in which the performance of the algorithm is challenged for the years to come, particularly due to the introduction of certain constraints, such as, well, complex products, 15 minutes MTU, the transition to flow base, etc. So there are a number of questions in the consultation relative to non-uniform pricing, and we will be happy to receive your input and any of your concerns that you may have around the process. So maybe you can go to the next slide. So on the algorithm, on the terms and conditions and methodologies, on the algorithm development, there is also an important effort of consolidation. So the products and harmonized technical price limits actually become a single methodology, and we see there that the alignment with the implementation, well, with the provisions of the clean energy package. So in the products, we there is a slight modification to let's say adjust naturally to the 15-minute requirements as per the clean energy package. And on the technical price limits, there is the introduction of the provision of the clean energy package that said that there shall be no limit upper or lower to the energy prices, including for bidding and clearing prices. And on the improvements on market coupling part, there is this streamlining of tasks. Because of the introduction of the MCO, there is a streamlining of the tasks that are for the MCO against those that are for NEMOs only. And on the algorithm methodology, there is an important streamlining as well of the governance of the algorithm, in line with the principles that have already been presented by Salvatore. So that's about it for my side. So I pass the relay to Pavel so that he explains more in detail the mechanisms. Thank you.
Thank you, Julio. I would just ask Mathieu to give me the control. So good morning, everybody. I will present the section 3 of the chapter Julio started as well. It's all under title 4, and then I will continue with chapters 2 and 3, which are which I will present together. So there are lots of connections between those two. So you will see why it is done like this.
I think it
just
should
to-
work, Pavel.
Yeah,
Can you check?
thanks. Yeah, I have the control. Okay. So just to recap, after the analysis we did, what was not 100% correct in the old regulation or in the current regulation, we had struggles with pricing of intraday capacity because the chosen way was to include intraday auctions, which only now are envisaged by the electricity regulation. Then we have seen in the past some issues with decoupling and the performance of the algorithm. So there are some timings which are quite stretched already, and there are many new features and markets which the algorithm has problems with currently. Then as introduced by Salvio, we had some issues with the governance. So hopefully the common governance of TSOs and NEMOs can help us to at least improve the governance of the part of the coupling and algorithms. And we also saw some troubles with, for example, scheduled exchanges in which it was not clear which TSOs should propose this. So it led to big delays. So what we have, the topics we have now in the CACM regulation, you can see on the screen. So we have the gate times, we have backup, fallback, and then the operational parts, which we propose to merge into one single methodology to save one thing, the bureaucratic burden, and mainly to improve the flexibility of the processes. So it will be up to the NEMOs and TSOs to propose the timing for each part, and we can optimize the coupling processes in this way. What you can see there is also delivery of results and input data. These are tackled in a separate chapter on the day-ahead coupling, that is chapter 2 under title 4. Nevertheless, parts of it will be also part of this methodology, which is called timings and procedures. There was a lot of discussion on fallback. We already had a workshop on that topic separately. What Salvio already introduced is that in one of the options, that is the decentralized one, there is the need to designate a fallback entity. Otherwise, it's done by the central entity, the MCO. And it is also envisaged as it's part of these timings and procedures. It is envisaged to be all EU methodology. All the rest was and like all EU methodology already, so there are no changes. So what we foresee as the benefits on this proposal is that there will be a lower risk of decoupling, improved governance, less bureaucratic burden, and more flexibility to introduce new timings and procedures within the process of coupling. Now I would like to skip to the intraday market. The situation there is very similar to the day ahead. As I already introduced the problem with intraday auctions, we needed to include the intraday auctions in the new regulation as well. We need to secure and describe how the intraday auctions interact with the continuous trading. And the third point, you can see that we introduced a difference between the intraday cross-zonal gate closure time and just intraday gate closure time. And that is because we envisaged, we saw some issues already with the sharing of order books, either in fallback in day ahead or in intraday. The issue is the last hour of continuous trading. So we tried to distinguish these two options. Again, we merged all those items into the timings and procedures for a single intraday coupling. And we hope that this will help to make these processes more efficient and more flexible in order to perform better results. Same as in day ahead, we also included the delivery of results and input data in here. So there are some parts which will be proposed by the methodology, as you can read in the consultation documents. Nevertheless, the general concept of what should be delivered in what form, from who to whom, same as in day ahead, it is described in chapter 3 of title 4. Once again, to wrap up, we provided the missing legal gap, which is the introduction of intraday auctions. Compared to the electricity regulation, we say that these auctions shall be part of the intraday coupling, and we improved the situation and increased the competition in the last hour of the day ahead by making separate definitions of the different gate closure times. And we added also many definitions on gate opening times for all couplings. So for intraday auctions, continuous, even in day ahead. So again, there are some envisaged benefits from this. The most desired one is the improved competition here, we believe, and the rest is very similar to the day ahead. So it will be more flexible with less bureaucratic burden because there will be only one methodology to approve. Just to show you what we meant with the flexibility in both timeframes. On the top timeline, I want to show you what is the current single day coupling timing. You can see it in the blue box. And the idea which we propose in the timings and procedures is to make the possibility for NEMOs and TSOs to propose a new timing which could stretch it more to the afternoon or even more to the mornings. So you could start the coupling either before 12 or provide the final results after 3:30. Now these times are written in the regulation. We thought it would be beneficial to make them more flexible so they will be part of the methodology. And the question is whether the 12 o'clock gate closure time for day ahead should be a cornerstone of the regulation and be kept at 12 o'clock, or if it should be flexible and part of the proposed part of the methodology on timings and procedures. In the day ahead market, you can see this is the current setting for intraday auctions. And here the question is where to put the fallback procedures if we decided to stretch the timings more to the afternoon from the day ahead. So we could use the intraday auctions as a fallback option, or we could simply cancel them and use this time to simply provide more time for fixing all the different issues there. So there are many options how we can improve fallback, improve procedures there, and so on. Yeah, so this would be about the main coupling part, and we also introduced several changes to chapter 4, which is clearing and settlement, shipping, and congestion income distribution. In the current regulation, there is the problem with the financial default of NEMO, which is not envisaged. So this was already introduced by Salvio, and there also we found out that the legal framework is not consistent with the other regulations, like the balancing and system operation, and it is not clear what the congestion income distribution is like currently, because the responsibilities are sort of scattered. So we propose to remove the shipping agent from the regulation because its role was very unclear there. It was allowed to introduce this entity. It was taken care for in the regulation, but not in a very clear way. So each member state dealt with it differently. And we also dealt with the clearing and settlement options, and provide two options for the balance for clearing and settlement and balance responsibility of the NEMOs. The option 1 is the decentralized one, where each NEMO would perform the clearing and settlement and be balance responsible, while in the centralized option, it would be the same for internal trades. Nevertheless, between the NEMO trading hubs, the job to clear and settle and be balance responsible would be assigned to the MCO. Then this, of course, would be covered by a separate methodology, which would set the minimum requirements. There were no major changes in the firmness of cross-zonal capacities in case of force majeure. So you can see the details in the consultation document here. And then the last item I have here is the issue with the congestion income distributor, where again we made two options for the decentralized and centralized options, which option 1 means that the congestion income distributor would be designated by the TSOs, while option 2 is sort of clear, and this job would be performed by the MCO. So this is it from me. So thank you for your attention, and I give the word back to Mathieu.
Yeah. Thank you, Pavel. Let me see if I can also get back control. I think I have it. So okay. Oh, I'm going too quick here. Yes. So thanks, Pavel, for explaining this part. I think we now move to the Q&A. We already have gathered a lot of questions, and I would propose that we try to go through them in blocks. From the chat, we gathered, of course, all the questions, and we'll share them among us, and then each of us will try to respond to them. I think we'll go in order of the presentation. So we'll start with the MCO governance, and then go through them as such. I don't know, Salvio or Christophe, do you want to say something?
Yeah, Mathieu. So again, thank you very much for all your questions. Maybe we'll start. We try to go to follow the order, and as said by Mathieu, we will try to group them. So maybe the first question for Salvio comes from Yannick Fulpin, and the question is whether we consider, or whether it will be considered that the centralized or decentralized approach could also manage the balancing activation EU platform. I guess this is a wider issue, but is it something that could be considered in this guideline?
Well, Christoph, when we proposed this legal single entity, we didn't have in mind any other platform. So yeah, it is not the intention of the proponents to create a platform for also for balancing. I'm not saying that this is an obstacle to any further development, but this was not an intention, according to my understanding.
Yeah, maybe this is something that we could address in the future amendment of the balancing guideline. Then there is a second question from Georges Beretitz. And the question is about the ownership of PCR assets in terms of full members and versus service exchanges. Will the CACM 2.0 also address this issue in either the decentralized or centralized approach, or will this remain the sole responsibility of NEMOS?
Yeah, good. Good question. Indeed, in the proposal, there is no provision related to the ownership of the assets. So yeah, the ownership of the asset can remain as it is. Yeah, the unbundling is only related to the operational activity, and the legal single entity is not meant to be necessarily the owner of the assets they will use. This does not mean that they cannot become the owner, but there is no obligation to become the owner of the assets used.
Okay, thank you, Salvio. Then there are a couple of questions about the voting. The first one from Ludivine Marcenac. How will a vote be formed within a member state, for instance, to differentiate between day-ahead and intraday volume? And she was asking whether we could have a concrete example.
Okay, so for a concrete example, maybe we need to elaborate something meaningful. As a very first reaction, the idea is that if there are decisions impacting both day-ahead and intraday, aggregate volumes should be considered when it comes to, of course, sharing key for NEMOS, because trading volumes are used for NEMOS. But if there are a specific decision on day-ahead and intraday in a differentiated manner, there is no need to aggregate the volume for day-ahead and intraday. So we can apply the traded volume, the sharing key based on traded volume for day-ahead decisions, and equally the traded volume for intraday decisions.
Okay, then we have a very specific question from Andreas Pointe-Vol. Whether we discuss how to harmonize the harmonization of how to assign member states voting right share to TSOs not supplying customer. I think he has in mind the single interconnector TSOs who are in a member state. So how do we intend to deal with this with such an assignment?
Well, to my knowledge, the issue has not been addressed in the preparation of the proposal. I don't know, Mathieu, if you have any comment on that.
So if it's with regard to the single interconnector, I think the approach with the single interconnector is in that in each country, the single interconnector, according to national rule, gets a part of the vote. But that is already currently the case as well for single interconnector companies. But it needs a national decision on this sharing of the national vote, basically.
Okay, thank you. And then we have a bunch of questions raised by by a number of participants. They all point to the same thing. This was raised by Andre from OTE, by Cosimo from GME, Raphael, chair of the NEMO committee, but also by Benjamin Genet from ELIA. And the question is about whether we have what is the rationale behind such deep revision of the CACM regarding the MCO organization? Have we well considered the implication of such changes on the NEMOs and on the single day-ahead coupling and single intraday coupling? Whether these implications have been properly taken into account?
Well,
So
this is a very, very open question. It's a very open question with.
But this is a recurrent one, raised by.
Yeah, I fully understand that this is probably one of the main aspect related to this proposal, because we are proposing two possible changes. One is more evolutionary, and the other might seem more revolutionary. So maybe the idea of a legal single entity is perceived as a very ambitious target, but we have been discussing for, I would say, a couple of years the necessity of this change in governance, including, of course, the analysis of all the what we call the failures of the current one. So, for instance, we considered all the difficulties that we faced in the implementation of the interim coupling project. We still do not have the full day market coupling in place. We have delays in core flow based implementation. We faced a lot of conflicts between NEMOs, and NRAs were involved as a body to provide guidance, even though we are not supposed to be an arbitration body. So there are many reasons pushing us towards a solution which simplifies the current framework, which is highly conflictual. So I think this is the main rationale underlying both options. Finding a governance which is as standard as possible, and probably the legal single entity is the simplest one, because we utilize a structure which is already well established in all kind of business. So a limited company with its own rule, precise responsibility, and so on. And the decentralized approach tries to mimic the same structure without having this strong requirement of creating a legal entity. But both aim at the same purpose: reducing the high level of conflicts implicit in this current governance.
Thank you, Salvo. But if I understand well from the question raised in the chat, there are also concerned with this option one and the cost that this option will imply, and how this cost will be recovered. And there is also an alternative proposal or a suggestion from Raphael, whether we intend to consider the implementation of the joint governance principle agreed by NEMOs and TSOs as a potential additional option.
Yeah, this has been discussed with NEMOs and TSOs in the specific platforms, in particular within the pentalateral coordination group. So we welcomed the proposal, which is a step forward. Yeah, I'm not saying that this will be completely neglected, but based on the internal discussion we had, it seems not ambitious enough in terms of solving the problems that we identified.
Okay, and a question from another question from Andre Macha. Will the cost in particular of this unbundling solution, will this cost be part of a recovery scheme?
Well, as I said, the eligibility of cost will be addressed in the methodology. So in the current proposal, there is no specific reference on how the cost incurred by NEMOS for establishing the new entities will be recovered. So yeah, the discussion will take place when the methodology for identifying the eligible cost will be submitted to ACER and NRAs.
Okay. And another question from Yannick Fulpin about this unbundling. Will this apply also this unbundling from TSOs?
I would say the article is clear. The unbundling is related only to NEMO. So the entity performing the MCO operational task needs to be unbundled from NEMOs. Nothing is said in reference to the TSOs.
And would it make sense to include this in the scope of this?
Yeah, TSOs are, well, this is my personal opinion, of course. Now I'm providing a personal opinion. TSOs are already regulated entities, and we do not see why they should have any conflict of interest. But yeah, it could be discussed.
Okay. And another question from Marie Bourous from Eurelectric about the implementation time frame of such a new governance, if it is adopted. Any views on the time it will need to be implemented?
Mathieu, if I'm not wrong, there is a final provision in the current proposal defining the timeline for implementing the proposal themselves. Yes,
yeah,
it's encompassing all the other. Yeah,
yeah, indeed. No, so on the implementation timeframe, I think what we propose indeed in the transitional arrangements is that those proposals, they need to be submitted. They have a timeline for when they enter into force, basically, which is indeed then the deadline for submitting those proposals. But those proposals include a implementation timeline. So after the approval, there's an implementation timeline, which is indeed then the deadline for implementing the changes. So I think we currently say between 6 and 12 months for submitting a proposal, and then indeed, standard is 12 months, but a different implementation timeline can be proposed in the proposals. So both on both setups, there is subsequent proposals, subsequent processes, and they actually define the implementation timeline.
Okay, so before moving to the question related to the cost recovery aspects, there are two very specific questions maybe for you, Salvio. The first question from Peter, from the Danish regulator. Is it correctly understood that the NEMOs and TSO will receive equal amounts of votes, so 50-50 split? And the question is, what will happen if the TSOs and NEMOs cannot agree? Is there any escalation measure in such a case?
First question, the answer is yes. So each member state will assign equally the vote to the community. So as I said in the presentation, the NEMO community will receive 50% and 50% will be received by TSOs. So indeed, there is a very exceptional case where all NEMOs agree on something and all TSOs disagree, and in that case there will be a sort of a tie, but there is no tie break rule for the time being, and no no escalation process in the current proposal. I don't know, Mathieu, if you want to complement, but
I think well answered. That's all.
And then another specific question from Georges Beretitz. It's about the idea to have a similar uniform price indicator for the intraday market in case of multiple intraday NEMOs within a bidding zones. And the question is whether the CACM 2.0 could provide for an obligation to establish such a bidding zone-wide intraday price indicator.
Oh,
which seems to exist in case of for the day-ahead market.
well, this is not, I would say, a governance question, if I correctly understood.
Yeah.
But we didn't discuss this indicator.
Okay.
Yeah, this could be a proposal, but it is not a question in terms that in terms of the current proposal. So there is no such an indicator in the current proposal.
Indeed, but okay, this is something which could be discussed
Yeah, sure.
under the transparency. Okay, now let's move to the cost recovery question. There is one question from Michela Beltracci about whether this the three cost recovery mechanisms which are mentioned in the presentation or in the proposal. So will all these three options be used, or only the network tariff one will, or the network tariff one will be the only eligible method? So do we intend to harmonize a bit this cost recovery mechanism?
Well, the harmonization is already proposed, because the harmonization in this case means that in any case, either NIMOs or TSOs will full recover their cost related to the MCO activities. So, and this is the main harmonization. So it doesn't matter how, but what is for sure is that they will recover the MCO cost. TSOs probably through regulated tariff. NIMOs through regulated fees or other regulated mechanisms. We may also envisage that other regulated mechanisms could apply for TSOs in case the national legislation does not allow recovering the cost through network tariffs. So we simply listed many tools that can be used for recovery the cost. So this will be managed at a national level, but the consequence, the implication will be always the same, that cost will be recovered.
Okay, thank you. Then we have two questions from Ludivine Marcenac. The first one is about whether Acer will also have the competence to approve the budget for the reviewed MCO plan. Would it not be more appropriate that NRAs approve the budget of costs related to the following year in order to ensure more certainty and stability in the cost recovery process?
I guess we have to distinguish between the two approaches. So in the decentralized approach, the budget will be in the annual work plan. Yes, this is the tool that we created. The annual work plan is in both options. But in case of decentralized, the annual work plan will be submitted by NIMOs and TSOs. In case of LSC, legal single entity, the annual work program will be submitted by the entity. And in both cases, the annual work program will contain not only the investment plan, but also the budget. And this budget is intended to be endorsed by Acer and NRAs. So yeah, this is exactly the process of defining cost ex ante through the budget and ex post through the annual cost report.
Thank you. And the two last questions on the cost recovery schemes. The first one from Ludivine Marcenac. How will the MCO fees be determined and handled at a national level? And the second question from Yannick Fulpin. Does the regulatory recovery mechanism, will this regulatory recovery mechanism include potential uplift cost?
Okay. first question, the answer is related to the methodology for eligible cost. So in the methodology for eligible cost, or in the case of legal single entity, will specify also how the MCO fees will be calculated. We only included as a provision in the proposal that there should be full compliance with this methodology for determining the MCO fees and the sharing key. So whichever will be the structure of the MCO fee, this fee should allow cost sharing compliant with the sharing key described in the current formula. So this is the only constraint to the methodology for determining the MCO fee. And the second question was?
Will the regulated recovery mechanism include potential uplift cost?
I think this is probably related to the network tariff mechanism that can be used for cost recovery. So we only made reference to network tariffs as a possible mechanism for cost recovery. We didn't specify how this network tariff should be shaped. So I think nothing will prevent using uplifts or other kind of tariffs. I think it's a very general concept of network tariff.
Okay, thank you. Now we have a few questions on the second part of the question, so more for Julio and Pavel. And so the first, it's not really a question, but maybe a comment from Cosimo that who thinks that the way the CACM opens to non-uniform pricing seems quite ambiguous, as it starts from stating the principle of uniform pricing, including the chance for uplift in the second stage. And for him, this seems quite contradictory. And there is a question from Marie Bourous from Eurelectric, who is asking what is the gain on computational time for euthymia, and whether there are some assessment study available who could show this gain in terms of computational time.
Okay, so thank you very much, Christophe, and thank you for Cosimo and Marie for asking those questions. So first on Cosimo's concern, this was the version that in the end was agreed at this stage by Acer and the NRAs. But of course, I guess that the principles are more or less aligned, but of course the wording may be clarified if the parties understand that some clarity may be in order. So of course, thank you for pointing that out, and I guess that we'll take that into account. On the gain of on the issue of the non-uniform pricing and the gain of computational time, at this moment there are a number, or there is one internal study that has been deemed preliminary. So it has not been envisaged for public publication. But as it has been said on the slides, so there is the full willingness to keep market participants and of course all the other stakeholders in phase and updated on these thoughts when or whenever it may be decided to go in that direction of opening the way to non-uniform pricing. And I guess that if this is the way that is brief in the future, detailed information will be given to market participants in due time.
Okay, thank you, Julio. Another question from Cosimo. Is the LSC under option 2 expected to be established in the standard 2 months from the entry into force of the new CACM, or under the 6-12 months like provided in the transitional provision article?
So if it is the LSC, I guess that it's a question more for Salvio, because LSC, if I'm not wrong, is legal single entity.
Yeah.
Maybe, Christophe, I think I answered this question before. Okay. It was the same question before.
Okay.
Okay, and what is the a question from Ludivine Marcenac? What is the rationale to introduce cost efficiency criteria in a centralized European function? How the efficiency will be assessed?
So I guess that this is also Salvio's.
Yeah.
This is centralized function.
Yeah.
But the next question that I had was from Cosimo, if you want.
Yes, the current approach seeking for maximization and defining in the algorithm methodology the concept of scalability and repeatability provide flexibility to the operation of the system. Why renouncing to such flexibility, which never proved detrimental?
So I understand that that concern. So indeed, we are when we put something in CACM, we are making the balance between flexibility and providing clarity to market participants and stakeholders. It has been understood by ISAs and the NRAs that that it was important to deliver clarity on what scalability and repeatability meant, because they were issues that were, let's say, somehow contested in the past, and there is the intention, at least at this stage, among NRAs and ASA, to deliver more let's say, a clear definition of what both of these mean.
Okay, thank you. And maybe one last question from Marie. I don't know whom could answer this question. It's about the definition. Okay, MTU. MTU is defined at least as short as ESP, and she's asking what this means.
So this is one of those items that corresponds to the translation of what is said in the clean energy package. So the MTU in the clean energy package, it is it is said that it shall be at least as short as the imbalance settlement period for both the intraday and the ahead market. So we have included this in the definition of the MTU itself, and we consider that it was the most let's say cleanest way to introduce directly that changement on the CACM amendment. I'll just write on the chat the Article 8.2 of the Internal Energy Market Regulation, so the clean energy package, and you'll see that it's a direct translation of that.
Okay, thank you, Julio. Mathieu, did I overlook one important question in the chat?
Yeah, maybe I see that there were some questions on the shipping agent and on whether the TSO can be the shipping agent. Maybe to be clear that there is still a national possibility. So step one is NEMO tasks clearly assigned to NEMOs, etc., etc. But there is still a possibility on a national level to delegate certain tasks, certain national tasks, or certain NEMO tasks, to other entities. And if that is decided on a national level, and indeed, if on a national level it is decided that a certain NEMO task is done by the TSO, and after this decision is indeed taken, then indeed this is still a possibility. But I think what we're trying to prevent is that the CACM regulation allows all this. I think we're trying to clearly allocate tasks to entities, and then indeed on a national level give this room for delegation. Yeah.
Okay. Any other important question that we could address, given that we are also running a bit late?
There are a couple of questions about the IDAS at 3 p.m. that Pavel may want to address. From Gabriela and from Tore.
So should I read them or?
Yes, please.
Let me just check. So one of them is, will it be possible to have IDA at 3 o'clock, since there is requirement to recalculate capacity before each intraday auction? And the second one from Gabriela is how to use IDAs as a fallback if there is no cross-border capacity provided by the TSOs at 3 o'clock. So if my presentation towards IDAS as a use of fallback, of course, means that it would be part of the day-ahead process. So the question is whether we can use the spot of these IDAS and use them as a new auction. It is not anyhow predefined of what sort of auction this should be. If it should be again shadow auction, another implicit auction, and this is left for the timings and procedures to be proposed. So there is nothing concrete envisaged yet, and we are free still to discuss this once the methodology is being created. There will be therefore no need to provide any capacity for that auction because it will be still the day-ahead capacity. I guess
maybe on the recalculation, maybe Pavel, on the recalculation, I think there's an exemption for the 3 o'clock one. So
yeah, on the first question,
yeah,
it's the current status sort of.
Indeed. Yeah.
Okay. Any other question, Mathieu, that we could quickly address? Otherwise,
I think I think we touched upon most topics, at least briefly. So also in view of time.
Yeah. So our apologies if we could not properly address all the questions raised during this this webinar. Maybe I would like to remind you that you are more than welcome to resubmit your question in the public consultation if you are not if you want. I would like to thank Mathieu, Salvio, Julio, and Pavel for their participation. And I look forward to the second workshop this afternoon on capacity calculation and the bidding zone review process. Thank you very much. See you in a few hours.